really excited to be welcoming three of Pennsylvania's Waterkeepers into conversation tonight to share a little bit more about with us about what it is they do, what does a waterkeeper do, and what is the work that is unique in their own context, what are the kind of challenges that they're encountering in that work. And then we will have a chance at the end for folks to jump into breakout rooms. So if you can stay around and join us for a little longer this evening, around 8 o'clock, we'll split into breakout rooms by Watershed and be joined by our speakers who will continue to kind of share in those smaller settings as well. So we have a full agenda. So, and just a word of note that we are recording this evening. So if you don't want your face to be part of the recording, you can just go ahead and pop your camera off. We should, if all of our speakers stay on time, get a bit of a chance for some Q&A at the end of the first hour. And so we will be inviting folks to unmute and ask questions. But for now, if you can stay muted, that would be great so that we can move through our program this evening. One final word from me before I turn it over to our first speaker from this evening is just to acknowledge that all land is indigenous land, and here in Pennsylvania there are many indigenous nations and peoples who were the original stewards of this land. They continue with us to this day, and it is part of PA IPL's commitment and practice to begin by acknowledging that we stand in a line of stewards who are caring for this land that is our sacred and common home now. That is part of a larger commitment that we have to upholding environmental justice principles through our organizing work. And so if you'd like to learn more about how we are centering and bringing environmental justice in as a core theme within our organizing, I invite you to check out the link in the chat. So thank you for being here tonight. I'm very grateful to see all of you. I'm looking forward to a great conversation. And so I am very excited to welcome our first speaker. We have Ted, who is here from the Lower Susquehanna Riverkeeper Association. Yes, that's correct. Ted serves there as the riverkeeper and also as the executive director. He is an alliance builder, a diplomat, and an educator, and also, when the situation calls for it, an unrelenting defender and advocate of our right and the river's right to remain healthy and prosperous. So I'm sure Ted is going to share a whole bunch more about what he does. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ted. Thanks for being here tonight.
Well, thank you. So just to say, the person who's probably going to go ahead and break up our timing is probably me, but I have a timer in my other screen. So I'm going to be watching the timer as I talk to keep myself in check. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot going on here in the Lower Susquehanna River region. A lot of issues to worry about, a lot of cases we're working on, and plenty of people to engage with about all these issues. So let me start my presentation, and I'm sure everyone can see this. What I am not going to do tonight is to get very technical with you guys, because just in 15 minutes, it's going to be really impossible for me to do that. So I'm just going to be staying pretty high level. I'm going to try to catch myself as much as I can, not to go into the weeds, but I'm going to keep it pretty high level. So Lower Susquehanna Riverkeeper Association, we are all about advocacy and policy, enforcement, stewardship, and education. I'm sure my colleagues on the call will get into it slightly, but I figured I'd just give a very brief background about Waterkeeper Alliance. So we are a licensed waterkeeper organization licensed by Waterkeeper Alliance. There are over 300 other groups across the entire world in 46 countries that are protecting water. And we are advocates and part of a global movement for clean water. And there's plenty of impact with Waterkeeper Alliance. 5.9 million square miles of waterways, again, over 300 groups, a lot of supporters, and 47 countries. We have the Lower Susquehanna River Watershed, and I'll show you a map there in just a second. And just to explain what we do again at a very high level, we monitor for patrol. We monitor, this always does that. We monitor for pollution in the Susquehanna River and its creeks by patrolling, investigating, and collecting data. We insist that environmental laws are enforced by our regulators, and we enforce the law when our state and federal agencies fail to do so. We also use science, we build coalitions, and we file reviews to update laws and regulations to improve water quality, We also educate lawmakers, youth, and adults on issues that we see around the Susquehanna. And of course, we always organize stewardship activities like volunteer cleanups and citizen science programming. And our events are always catered to bringing people just a little bit closer to our river and the majestic beauty that surrounds the lower Susquehanna. So this is a map of our territory. It's a fairly large territory. We have about 8,500 square miles of land and water in the Susquehanna watershed. It starts in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, and it goes all the way down to Havre de Grace, Maryland, where the Chesapeake Bay, the nation's most prominent, largest estuary, starts up in Havre de Grace, Maryland. We also cover the western part of the watershed, which is the Juniata watershed. So between the lower Susquehanna and Juniata, it's about 8,500 square miles. Again, I don't want to go into very technical things, but just to give everyone a brief background about the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act was passed in 1972. And at that time, we had a Congress that saw we had a national emergency around water and our water resources. The Cuyahoga River caught on fire, not once, not twice, not three times, but I can't even count how many times. I don't even know what the real number is, but it's over 10, I believe. We had a public outcry due to pollution all across the country. And that's one of the reasons why Waterkeeper Alliance was formed. Waterkeeper Alliance was formed by a group of fishermen and anglers that needed to see a difference on the Hudson River. And that's where most of the advocacy started, on the Hudson, and then spread throughout the entire country and then around the world. So the Clean Water Act, again, has a lot of statutes. There's a lot of regulations, but one of the most prominent ones is Section 301 of the Clean Water Act, which makes it illegal to discharge pollutants into a water body without a permit. So a lot of the work that we do focuses on point source dischargers and making sure that permits are in compliance and making sure that permits are being updated on time and reissued and renewed, and things like that. So a lot of the work we do is around point sources, and we make sure that these dischargers who have permits are doing what they're supposed to do and not violating the law. There's plenty of lessons learned over the years. Water pollution is a thing where if you don't see it, you might not know what's going on. Or if you have a legislative body that's not necessarily giving you all the information all at once, we don't really know what's going on. So it's still a very serious problem across the country, especially for vulnerable communities, including environmental justice communities. But we must stay vigilant and powerful against the forces that constantly seek to undermine and weaken the clean every day. And groups like ours are here to stand in between them and what's right. Also, once a waterway is impaired, it's extremely difficult to restore it and bring it back to what it once was. So we want to make sure that whatever waterways we have right now are protected forever, and the ones that are facing issues get the help that they need. And we also have to remind ourselves that the Clean Water Act objective is to restore and maintain the integrity of our waters. And no one has a right to pollute, nobody. So we always have to make sure that our government agencies are keeping track of these sources and making sure that they're doing their job. It's not government agency opinions are not the gospel. The courts say what the law is. So with that, I just want to go over a lot of the cases that we're working on, again, at a very high level. So some of you might be familiar with the great capital of Pennsylvania, which is Harrisburg. Harrisburg is has an antiquated sewer system, which discharges raw sewage pretty much any time it rains. And right now we are in the process of making sure that the city of Harrisburg and its water authority, Capital Region Water, are doing what they need to do to achieve compliance with the Clean Water Act. It's been a long time coming. Our organization took legal action to essentially be part of this, given the inaction by the water authority along with the state and federal agencies. So we had a seat at the table. We renegotiated another consent decree, and now the water authority has to put plans together in place to correct the problems and achieve compliance. So big issue here in Pennsylvania is combined sewer overflow. Another issue we're dealing with is landfills. Landfills obviously are across the country. We have many landfills in Pennsylvania. One landfill in particular in York County was part of a national study with other water keepers across the country. And part of that study was us going out, collecting water samples and testing specifically for PFAS, forever chemicals. And I chose modern landfill because I knew it was discharging pollutants and it was harming the waterway. And come to find out, the levels of PFAS that were discharging from this landfill were the highest recorded out of the 107 water keepers that took part in the study. So it had the highest results in total PFAS, and is a hotspot for PFAS and many other pollutants. Um, this landfill was violating their permit year after year after year, so we filed legal action and filed a lawsuit against Republic Services here, to have them come into compliance and fix their issues, along with pay significant penalties for violating the law. So again, landfills, we've worked on other landfills too in the region, but this is one that we're currently working on. Also, food processing facilities. You may not think that food processing facilities are emit pollution, but they sure do. In this, anyone knows Hanover Foods? You can buy a can of beans, and most likely it could be a Hanover Foods brand. So they're very prominent throughout the country, and they were violating their permit in many different ways, looking at nutrients, different bacterias. Um, Dissolved oxygen and things like that. They were violating their permit for a very long time. Right now, we actually are working collaboratively with the DEP, the EPA, and the DOJ. We're coming close to resolving these issues and hopefully drafting a consent decree, which will to resolve our complaint. So more to come on Hanover Food soon. But again, food processing plants are a concern for our region. We also filed legal action against the Federal Highway Administration for a land use decision to build a proposed highway in Adams County and York County. The Federal Highway Administration has to follow protocol or conditions under the National Environmental Policy Act, and in this case, they did violate the NEPA, and there was not appropriate alternatives that were in place to take a look at what would be a proper way to control traffic and flow. And so in this case, we took on a land use case, which sometimes you don't necessarily see a lot of water keepers take on, but in this case, it would have affected many acres of wetlands, and two streams, and the environmental assessment never addressed environmental concerns facing the Susquehanna River with pollution that would be caused by the proposed highway. So another case for us there. We're also right now working on a pump storage facility. So there's a pump storage facility being proposed on the Susquehanna River here in York and Lancaster counties. We're actually Thursday, for the people that are near and dear to this, just a quick news update. And for anyone else who's interested, on Thursday, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission will be making a decision on the preliminary permit for Cuffs Run. So we'll be issuing some information on Friday or perhaps Thursday, letting everyone know what the decision was. Hopefully the decision is to deny the permit, which is what they should be doing. The Eastern Hellbender is the Pennsylvania state amphibian, and it's lost habitat all throughout its region, throughout the Appalachia and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They denied the Hellbender Endangered Species Act protection, and with them denying that protection that they most desperately need, we filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service along with other organizations, Little Susquehanna Riverkeeper, Waterkeeper Alliance, Waterkeepers Chesapeake, and the Center for Biological Diversity. And this case right now is waiting for another order from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which we should be hearing from them in December of this year. Hopefully them issuing the protection for the Eastern Hellbender that we so desperately need again. And just to go into some of our victories here, one of the first things I took on coming on as the Waterkeeper in 2017 was addressing Brunner Island, which is a coal-fired power plant in York County. The power plant was essentially leaching toxic heavy metals into a nearby creek and into the Susquehanna River. It took water quality monitoring on our part and collaboration with Waterkeeper Alliance. And we filed a lawsuit against Brunner Island, Talent Energy, the owner, for multiple violations of the Clean Water Act. And we succeeded with a historic settlement with Town Energy, which provided $1 million penalty, $100,000 supplemental environmental projects to two local streams in York County for restoration. And then they also had to remedy all of the issues on site that were causing the leaching to occur. So very good case, very successful case here in York County. The Dirty Dam deal. If anyone has heard about hydroelectric dam relicensing, you might have heard about the Conowingo Dam, which is in Maryland. The Conowingo Dam was up for relicense in 2014, and we've been at this since 2009, here acting diligently over the course of over 15 years to relicense this dam. Make a long story short, we also filed legal action against the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission for unlawfully issuing a license for the dam. The court eventually vacated that license, and now we are in the process of reconsidering the 401 water quality certification for the dam. So we are a party to that with our partners at Waterkeepers Chesapeake, and we're now essentially negotiating another water quality certification with the state of Maryland and Constellation Energy. So more to come on that. Again, this is a huge case. The Conowingo Dam is one of the largest and single most deadly threats to the Chesapeake Bay and its health. And dams, if anyone doesn't know, dams are not licensed or permitted like other facilities where it's 5 years. In this case, it's a 50-year license. So we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to make sure that the dam's operations do not impede on water quality. We also had a really good successful case against the slaughterhouse. And we had a very good penalty here, which went towards restoration projects in multiple counties. Again, this facility was violating their permit for about 10 years. The state did not take action to correctly remedy the situation. It took citizens and our organization to take legal action and get this facility back into compliance and also pay a hefty fine. We also were a fiscal sponsor to our friends at the Conestoga River Club over the last years to develop a plan for restoration and rehabilitation of the Conestoga River Water Trail. So that plan is now being implemented, and we're waiting to see the good stuff that's going to come from that. And this is just a general list of issues we're working on. I won't stay on this slide for too long because I'm going to imagine my time's probably up. And I didn't even set the timer. How about that? So I'm about done though. Just a couple new programs for us. So we have an umbrella program titled Water Watchdogs, which underneath that umbrella has a robust bacteria monitoring program, a microplastics monitoring program, which we're going to be rolling out a new cohort of volunteers this coming winter, along with a smallmouth bass monitoring program. We also have an educational program, which we just purchased this year from Shanksmere Outfitters. Some 2024 highlights this year. We had 40 days out in the river, 1,300 students, over 536 staff hours, and 100 volunteer hours, and 13 schools and 3 camps. So we were very busy here in the lower Susquehanna. There's a lot of issues we're working on, everything from non-point source pollution like agriculture and stormwater runoff, again, to the many, many, many different point sources we have, which need to be constantly checked and regulated and monitored at all times. You'd be surprised to see how much polluters get away with and how much work that we have to do to make sure that they stay in compliance. So I'll stop there, and I think that's my time. Thank you so much, everybody. Looking forward to questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. I hope that you all are already as inspired as I am. I follow Ted from a distance, and I'm always amazed at the amount of work that the team is doing. So thank you for all you do to help keep our waters safe. It really goes a long way. Our second speaker now, I'm delighted to welcome Sandy Bin, who is with the Lake Erie Waterkeeper Group. She's going to share a little bit more about a watershed that is just a tiny part of Pennsylvania, but we share with a number of other states. And so I'm really eager to hear about the work that they're doing up there in Lake Erie to protect our shared waters. So Sandy, it's over to you. Sandy, I think you're still muted.
Yeah. And then I don't know if I can screen share or not. Let's see.
I'll make sure you have a permission.
Okay. And so I'm just going to do this short. We're much smaller than this Susquehanna. We've been around for about 20 years, but we're a very pure organization that works on water quality, fishable, swimmable, drinkable water. And we right now our major focus is on the Lake Erie algal blooms. Ted talked about the burning of the Cuyahoga. And, people in the watershed, the Lake Erie watershed, in the Pennsylvania portion, I don't know how much you know about Lake Erie and how it functions, and the Great Lakes in general. But the lakes flow, if you know the homes, how the five Great Lakes, but they go from the upper lakes to the lower lakes. And so Lake Erie is downstream from Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. And about 90% of our water comes through the Detroit River, which is the major source of it. But in the western basin of Lake Erie extends, it's about 186 miles of shoreline. It's the 11th largest freshwater lake in the world. And of course, is part of the Great Lakes. And as such, it has been kind of in some ways, it's been the poster child for the Clean Water Act. And I think from a Pennsylvania perspective, the waters flow from west to east. And for whatever geological reason, the shallowest part of the lake is on the western end and the deepest part is on the eastern end. So if you look at Lake Erie in Pennsylvania, you see blue deep water. If you look at Lake Erie on the western end where I'm located, it is murkier, and that's just because it's shallower and it's turbid. But the threat to the waters has come from, anything from in the 70s as the poster child for the burning of the Cuyahoga and the Clean Water Act. I think the Cuyahoga is a great example. And, the Erie, Pennsylvania area is another example of recovering watersheds. Although there's an issue at Erie that's bothered me for some time. But at any rate, the Cuyahoga has essentially recovered. You can kayak on it now because the Clean Water Act was a point source problem there primarily, and the upper waters in the Cuyahoga watershed are really a lot of, there's urban and there's issues with sewage and wastewater discharges certainly, but it's not a predominantly agricultural upper watershed, as is the Western Basin here where I'm at. And so since the waters flow from west to east, what we get goes into Lake Ontario and goes, of course, to the eastern shoreline. And the nutrient content in the water has been increasing going through the Buffalo Niagara River for some years. So what we focus on mainly is trying to reduce the nutrients in the Western Basin. I go back to, there were two parts to the Clean Water Act that maybe people don't remember or recognize. One was through the pipes and, the wastewater plants and essentially industry. And it required that you can't discharge into your waters any more than a certain pollutant load. It's not perfect, but it certainly addressed many of the problems because there were no laws before that as to limit what your discharges were from industry. And so it's been very successful, especially in the Cuyahoga in that light. And there's some factories and things in Erie, Pennsylvania area where they've been able to successfully argue and protect those waters and are making great headway. But the other part of it that happened back then in the 70s is that there was a lot of algae, and the cause of the algae then was phosphorus coming out of wastewater plants. And what most people may not remember is that algae was caused by, we switched from a wringer washer to an automated washing machine. And in that was the phosphorus. And there was so much phosphorus coming into the wastewater plants that there was no way that they could treat it enough to limit the phosphorus coming out. So if you were near a wastewater plant in the 70s, you would see suds. Almost any river, and across the whole United States this happened. And so the discharges were a lot. So Procter & Gamble fought tooth and nail to not have the phosphorus taken out of laundry detergent, said our clothes would be dirty, couldn't buy Tide anymore, it would be too expensive. Well, the way it was passed, 28 states passed bans on phosphorus in laundry detergent. And eventually Procter and Gamble caved, and actually, that is the way the algae was diminished in not only here in Lake Erie, but across the United States. And it's a piece of it's not so much part of the Clean Water Act as it was part of the algae component of it, which is not often discussed. So the second part I want to talk about, and I don't know if I can bring up the slides, is what has happened today. So Lake Erie recovered. It was, Dr. Seuss's book actually had the dying Lake Erie, and people here were able to get that taken away because Lake Erie was so great and it had recovered. Okay, can you see the screen now? No? Hello? Can you see my screen?
No, we're not able to see your screen.
Okay, then I'll just talk through it. It's okay. So we recovered. The walleye came back. We've become the walleye capital of the world. We're doing very well. And all of a sudden, I happen to live in the Western Basin on Lake Erie. And in the late 1990s, the water literally 1 year to the next turned green. And it turned very, very green very, very quickly. And, we were told it was from originally that it was from wastewater plants, but the wastewater plants had essentially reduced their phosphorus discharges from the ban on phosphorus in laundry detergent. Still an issue, but not nearly what it was. And the real culprit has been agriculture, runoff from agricultural fields. And so what we found through the years, about 20 years of working on this, that the change that happened literally from 1 year to the next was simply that these confined animal feeding operations began locating in our area. And at first it was dairy that came into the area. And I didn't realize it at the time, but dairy manure is put on the ground as a liquid. It's land applied as a liquid. And we are the old black swamp in the Western Basin, the Maumee Watershed. They drain the swamp, and when they drain the swamp, we have the most field tiled, ditched watershed in the nation, perhaps in the world, because this is just, there's that many pipes underneath draining the fields so that they can farm them. And so the big change was that the confined animal feeding operations and the manure applied to the ground was concentrated and came into the watershed. And we have had a growth in confined operations in the past 20 years of literally none to start with. And obviously farmers had their livestock on fields where there were many farms that raised different types of livestock. That's now all been consolidated, if you follow this issue at all, to about, probably 90% of the farmers that were in business before are now out of business. They couldn't afford to stay in it. So we've gone to the very large ag operations, and the problem for water in particular with that is simply that in consolidating, they also consolidated a huge volume of manure that's put around the barns and in fields close by. And so we've gone from no operations, and we're kind of unique in the respect that we have different kinds of livestock operations. So we have 24 million chickens, 1.8 million hogs, 400,000 dairy. And in the last 2 years, much to my anger and frustration, we have now added about 100,000 cattle to the watershed. And cattle have dry manure. They're like poultry manure, where the manure is not a liquid. And they come in and they're not permitted. It's through something called an Amish group called Schmucker. And they're tied to the world's largest beef industry called JBS. And we've turned in complaints. I actually went down a road and physically saw piles of manure along the road, and cattle in Quonset barns with manure piled next to it. And you could see the runoff in the ditches. You could physically look at it. You didn't have to test it. You didn't have to do anything. It was just brown and you knew it. And so we turned it into the state of Ohio, and they did issue violations. And they didn't have permits for like 1,800 cattle on one site. And so they're supposed to get a permit in by December 1st. But what happened was they just moved the manure around and moved it to other fields. No one knows where it's gone. And we have 100,000 cattle with no permits. They divide the parcels. We have documented over 50 parcel divisions. And what we're finding in the watershed, even beyond this cattle issue, is that most of our facilities are not permitted because we call them one unders that don't have any rules. So we kind of are becoming another poster child for clean water in our area, although Chesapeake certainly has it. There's many areas that have manure issues, the Gulf of Mexico and whatever. And how that relates to Pennsylvania and the type of algae that you have is not the type we have here. But as the phosphorus concentrations grow and the amount of cyanobacteria grows and toxins grow, the likelihood that one summer that the winds are just right is what happened here. And I'll end with this. In 2014, the city of Toledo told people not to drink the water, actually not even to bathe in it, because the toxins got into the treated water. And so it became an international issue. And we thought then that this issue would get resolved, but it didn't happen. So we're still working on that today. I just thought it might be interesting to zero in on this one issue that is really very important for all watersheds, USA, that have algae problems. And oftentimes it's related to these concentrated animal feeding operations. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for bringing us a different perspective. I know that the issues that you work on, there's a lot of similarities and then there's also big differences. So thank you for bringing us your perspective and sharing some of the challenges that are going on there. It really requires us taking like an intersectional approach to the work. We have to be thinking about the many different ways that pollutants are entering our waterways and the kind of the people and the human impacts. So thank you for sharing. All right, we're a couple minutes behind, but I'm going to turn it over to Captain Evan Clark with Three Rivers Waterkeeper to tell us a little bit more about his work over in the west of the state. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Let me spend a little moment here setting myself up and we'll get going. Let's see. Oops. All righty. Well, uh, hi everybody, and I'd like to say thanks. First, PA Interfaith Power and Light for inviting me to speak about our work here over in the southwestern corner of the state, and everybody else for being here and listening, and then especially the other Pennsylvania Waterkeepers for all the work you do. I'm Captain Evan Clark, and I get to be the waterkeeper for Three Rivers Waterkeeper. I'm going to start by giving you all a little presentation about our organization. After that, we'll talk some about some other aspects of my work that were requested. Right. Our Waterkeeper organization was founded in 2009 on the principle that our waters are critical to the health and the vitality and the economic prosperity of our region and communities. And Three Rivers Waterkeeper is both a scientific and a legal advocate for the community, and we work to ensure that our three rivers are protected and safe to fish and drink and swim and enjoy. We've already had a couple waterkeepers talk about the Waterkeeper Alliance now and the sort of work that we do. So I won't dig in too deeply on the technicalities of our work, because I think that Kay had also asked that I talk a little bit about what it means to me to be a waterkeeper as well. But we'll cruise through this quick little introduction. Oops. Having some sort of an issue here. We'll get there. Well, we work mostly through Allegheny County and in a smaller kind of region around there on the Allegheny and the Monongahela and on the Ohio River, and then all the little feeder streams that run into them. Wondering what we got going here. Okay, here we have a map of the area that we work in. You'll see a little cut out of the lower right-hand side there, because we also are bordered by a Youghiogheny Riverkeeper and Mountain Watershed Association, who's a close partner in a lot of the work that we do. What I get to do is do lot of river patrol and monitoring. The presence of our waterkeeper boat and kayaks on the three rivers is critical to improve the water quality through visible monitoring and patrols in areas where threat to water quality is greatest. I'm going to focus on a single part of how we work on the water today due to the short time we have. I spend a lot of time going out on weekly patrols. We collect data, including photographs, videos, GPS locations, notes, water samples, focusing on areas at risk, such as discharge points, either CSOs or industrial outfalls, barge routes, and sensitive fisheries. We organize and manage this data to enter water quality reports for our own internal investigations and to share with other environmental organizations, and of course for public education. I'm a little bit of trouble again here with our slides. So I get to spend a lot of time out on our boat with Koa Reeds, who's our environmental scientist, on our part targeted monitoring and pollution response. We generally survey outfalls and monitor the rivers for any issues and patrol, which helps me keep a fresh mental map. And of course, we're always looking for things going right too, like wildlife and people have an effect on, including enjoying our waters. And there's sometimes subtle and sometimes very apparent effect when we stay visible as well. I think it's a pretty important thing that our boat is out there and folks at some of these industries see that somebody's out there really keeping watch. Uh, this one was a big one for me in the first month of being a waterkeeper here around Pittsburgh, which was 3 years ago now, I guess. In May of 22, there was the Norfolk Southern train that derailed and dumped about 3,000 gallons of crude into the water and about 2 carloads of nurdles or pre-production plastic pellets. I felt I was in way over my head here trying to figure out how to do response to an incident of this size. Of course, we have all of our official first responders there who did a lot of work controlling oil and some of the plastics, but we spent a lot of time monitoring that and making sure that it was done right. We also work with the community and our legal team to identify areas of insufficient water quality data and inconsistent monitoring and minimal permit application review that's prevented meaningful action directed towards improving water quality. Three Rivers Waterkeepers scientific and legal advocacy is focused on holding polluters accountable to the law by utilizing Clean Water Act, and our advocacy efforts empower citizens to report and take action when their water quality is threatened. So long before I started at Waterkeeper, there was it came to our attention that fracking companies were dumping fracking waste into wastewater treatment plants, which of course are designed, primarily and pretty much just for disposing of sewage. So all of the pollutants from those fracking operations were flowing almost free out into the river, and we had a huge success working on getting that stopped in the area. Another big one that we've been working on really hard recently is this Styropec case. We were monitoring around Shell's new ethane cracker plant, which takes fracked natural gas and turns it into plastic pellets. That Shell's facility has the ability to produce more plastic than any other facility in the country. And so as they were getting built around here over the last 7 years, we were working to set a baseline on the amount of plastic that was in our waterways around that. And as a part of that, we ended up seeing there was this facility next door making styrofoam that was losing vast amounts of plastics into the water every time we visited. We tried to work with DEP and EPA, PA Fish and Boat, and other agencies to get them to stop it. In my opinion, should have been pretty simple under Clean Water Act, since they were discharging solids into our waterways, for them to start being fined and for their permit to make sure that they couldn't dump anymore. Ended up what I thought was not actually the case, and we ended up having to sue, and we're close to a settlement with them, which would include that they couldn't dump any more plastic. Unfortunately, the facility is responded to that now by closing, which I think is kind of a tragedy for us in our region. I'd much rather that styrofoam was manufactured around here in a place that we could keep an eye on it, and that the folks who work there could keep their jobs. Instead, the plastic, that styrofoam production is going to be moved out of state, and it will become somebody else's issue, probably around Cleveland, to monitor. I wanted to switch this up here real quickly to a little photo presentation. And how am I doing on time?
You have a couple minutes.
Okay, great. Let's see, we'll get this going. That'd be some cool background. He had asked that we talk about some of these subjects, inspiration, and um, I thought I'd jump in by saying I love our rivers. We all own them, and water's the thing that connects us all and the rest of the world. Clean water is precious and it's a valuable resource, and we all know that it's getting rarer. We're here in southwestern PA, and I think around the rest of the state, we're incredibly rich in water. And it's pretty crazy to watch the degradation of that still taking place. That said, there's been massive improvements in water quality as well. I mean, especially here in Pittsburgh, where the Monongahela was a dead river not too long ago, and Allegheny was not doing well, and Ohio, of course, was suffering. Come a long way in the last 100 or so years, when there was just a couple of species of fish that could survive in the water around here. We're to the point now that we're starting to see top predators, a huge sign of the really, really positive water quality change. The fact that we see bald eagles now regularly around town, and especially I think it's really nice to be able to see them so close to the hometown of Rachel Carson, just up the Allegheny. We're also seeing otters move back into our watershed as well. And so I just think that it's the coolest thing that I get to give back to the thing that inspires me, in an amazing community of keepers and other passionate river people. And I eat and sleep and work and love and dream and rest on the water. It's a couple of things I'd like people to know about our area. So in Pittsburgh, we're about 2,000 miles above the Gulf of Mexico on a river system that has 15,000 miles of navigable waterways and countless more streams. And about 5 million people drink the water downstream of us in Pittsburgh as well. So we end up feeling a pretty huge sense of responsibility to keep that water clean. And the area around us in the Midwest, especially in the Ohio River Basin, has been a little bit of an exception. Some of the big watersheds throughout the Midwest and the East, the Chesapeake Bay gets huge amounts of EPA funding every year, and the Great Lakes and upper lower Mississippi, that really makes a huge difference in the sort of projects that people are working on, and the water quality in those regions. And one of the things I'm most excited about is we're working with a large coalition of people on pushing towards getting the Ohio River that same sort of funding, that annual millions of dollars a year to work on river restoration and all the other issues that come along with impeded waterways. We'll spend a couple more minutes and then hand it back over. Just personally, again, as a water keeper, day to day, I I was shocked to find I just spend almost all my time on the phone, working with people in coalition, calling people about issues, working with my colleagues, and going to meetings. And my favorite parts of the way that I get to spend my time are bringing people out on the river and sharing this place that I know and love and have grown on for all of these years. And I think with that, I'm gonna end it and hand it back over.
Thank
See it
you.
come on a presenter.
Thank you, Captain Clark, for sharing, and also for picking up the invitation to share a little bit about your why, giving us a little bit of a behind the scenes look at what makes you love the watershed. Because I've never met a single person, I don't think, who's doing work caring for our waterways and protecting them that is not motivated by a deep love and sense of connection to those waters. So thank you for sharing what that journey is like for you. So we have about 6 or 7 minutes to go, and so we do have a bit of a chance for some Q&A here. So the way Q&A is going to go is like this. If you have a question for any three of our speakers, you can go ahead and use the raise your hand function, which you can find if you navigate towards the middle of your screen. You should have an option for the React. If you open React, it should give you an option to raise your hand. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask any one of our water keepers who's been here to join us this evening, feel free to go ahead and raise your hand. And while we wait for folks to navigate to that and think about questions they might like to ask, I'm wondering, Now that you each have heard from each other, Waterkeepers, is there anything you want to add back into the conversation?
I want to know where the plant is coming from Pittsburgh to Cleveland. More about it. I mean, I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
alarming, and so you've taken your problem and then passed it to our watershed, and I think we need to be aware or have more information on it. So I'll contact you afterwards to get more details, but
Yeah,
pretty
absolutely.
alarming.
And yeah, absolutely. And there's already, I think Styropack or BPV Styrenics already has a facility up there. I'd have to look to see the name of the little town around Cleveland that they're moving that production capacity to. But I definitely love to talk more about it, and I hope to go up there and do the same sort of patrolling.
Thank you both. It looks like we have some folks in the queue. So I think I saw Lori with her hand up first. So if you'd like to unmute and ask your question, thanks for being here.
I actually put it in the chat. I'm going to be attending a Great Lakes Sanctuary event sponsored by the Jefferson Society in our area, talking about declaring the sanctuary in part of Lake Erie. Do you think that any of that will benefit the water quality? Have you heard about that?
I don't believe so. Maybe you can give me information on it after this or just email me. And we can discuss it after this, but I'm not familiar with the project. Are you talking, is that in Canada or the US?
US.
Okay. And where's the sanctuary? Is there a physical location or is it just more?
It's a portion of it is they're calling it a Great Lakes Sanctuary, and their goals are, I believe, primarily to preserve the shipwrecks.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, now I know what you're talking about. Yeah, there's a group that's been working on shipwrecks. I have not, that's more of a museum and not a water quality issue, I hope, in terms of the shipwrecks and things.
is there
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would tie into the kind of work that we do.
is there a danger to leaving the shipwrecks for the water quality?
Well, they've been there for years, so I don't know. I kind of, you kind of leave it unless there's some evidence that there's something going on where they're leaking oil or something, which I assume there's not,
Okay,
but I don't know that. But now I know what you're talking about. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Lori and Sandy. It looks like we have Issy and John with a question as well.
Hi, I have a question for Sandra. She said that there was an issue in Erie, Pennsylvania that still bothered her, and I wondered what that was.
With foot and mouth and then whatever. I've gone to Pennsylvania and been in Erie a number of times, and my concern is that I went on a boat ride some years ago where they showed the area of concern and they showed the bay, and right beyond where the area of concern was at, there was discharges from some industrial facilities closer to where the bay enters into Lake Erie, and you can actually see the discolored water. And I was told at the time that that was not part of the area of concern and was not going to be addressed. That's the issue.
Thank you, Issy and John and Sandy again.
Yeah, that's
There's a
terrible.
question.
We had in York County, Pennsylvania, we had I can't quite remember if it was a malfunction of the sewer plant or if it was just draining into it was draining into the creek. But the creek that flows into the Susquehanna River, which flows into our bay, was getting some type of bubbly substance, brown. It was floating down the creek into the river, and then it was flowing down the river. Oh, so nasty. Oh, we lived with that for quite a while before I think they ended up redoing the water plant or the sewer plant there. Yeah. that's how that was fixed. But we still currently have, as you had stated just prior to me getting on here, the industrial uh, sewage. The, we still have that north of us. So we're still dealing with that in this day and age, 2024, from the capital of our state. It's a terrible problem.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to pop back in because we're running out of time. A final question for our three panelists this evening that ties into something that Pam had asked in the chat, but want to ask more broadly is, as local citizens, local people in community, what are ways that people can support your work, get involved? I know we're going to break into regional breakouts in just a moment here where people can get more connected with you, but in 15 words or less, what's your elevator spiel for getting community more involved in the work that you're doing? We'll start with Ted and then go to Sandy and then finish up with Captain.
Oh, sorry. I was pointing at somebody outside who's banging on my door. So mostly waterkeeper groups are member supported organizations. And the real reason why we're member supported is because a lot of the times, one, we all have a genuine, like everybody has, I'm sure, a place where they love to go to, whether it's on a creek or it's on the river. And like, that's a place people find solitude and peace. They bring their dog to it, they bring their kids to it and their grandkids to it. It really means something to them in their hearts. And when you become a member of a waterkeeper organization, and if that waterway that you so truly love and enjoy becomes polluted and nobody's doing anything about it, and your local waterkeeper gets involved and addresses the issue, it's really important that you're a member and you get to tell your story about what that waterway means to you in a court of law. So anytime that we file, complaints or legal action, a lot of times citizens get a right to say, and give a declaration to say, yes, this waterway means this and this and this. And so it's really important for us to follow through on enforcing the law and making sure that polluters are held responsible by having the voices of citizens be directly tied into it. So everybody, and this is what the Clean Water Act says, we all have a right, we need fishable, swimmable, drinkable waters, and every citizen has a right to take action into their own hands to make sure that waterway is protected. The river keepers and water keepers across the country allow that to happen and allow you to get a seat at the table for free. So one good reason.
Thanks, Ted. Sandy, what would you add?
Not much. Ted said it really well. I think sign up on our websites, just care about water. Civic organizations from Rotary or whatever have speeches and learn about your waters, care about your waters. But joining and signing up and increasing the citizen input helps us all to do our jobs, because we have more eyes and ears that tell us about the waters, because these watersheds are very large and it's a tough job.
Thanks, Sandy. Captain Evan, what would you add?
Exactly what both of them had to say, as well as it's just working inside your passion, figuring out the things that you're good at, and you're going to find organizations out there in your watersheds, and us as waterkeepers can be good networking folks to get you to those places, whether it's river cleanup or doing work with us in monitoring, or just plain old, and I think this is a really big deal, especially here, just spending a lot of time out on the water, enjoying it. So much of our region has lost a connection to the waterways after so many years of pollution. And, I feel like most of the work that I've done over the last 20 years that I've worked on the rivers around Pittsburgh has been to bring people back to the water. And I think after that, they find their passion and can jump right in.
Well, thank you all. This has been an inspiring conversation. I am so deeply grateful to each of you and the work that you are doing and the many people that help make that possible. So thank you all. Thank you for being here and sharing with us.